Hey, what's going on, everybody, and welcome back to my channel, Movie Files. Elliot here today to give you all my spoiler-filled discussion / review of the final part 4 of the Chilling Adventures of Sabrina. So if you haven't seen the episode yet, go check out my spoiler-free review. But then once you've seen it, come back, join the conversation, because we're talking about all the episodes, my favorite moments, my least favorite moments. We got to talk about episode 7, and we're, of course, breaking down the finale. We're breaking it all down. Again, this is a spoiler breakdown, and I'm going to have a fun time talking about it in this review with you all. But before we dive into it, as you can see on the screen now, make sure you all are following me on all my social media accounts like Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, which you can find all those links in the description below. If you are new to the channel, welcome to the community. Consider subscribing and hitting that notification bell. That way you can get the alert from when I drop new content. It would mean a lot to me if you all can like and share this video. It really helps out the channel, but I also appreciate all the support. And in the comments, again, we're talking full spoilers, so let me know your favorite moments, your least favorite moments, your favorite episode, your least favorite episode. We got to talk about the best episode of the entire series, chapter 7, and we also got to talk about that finale. And since we're talking spoilers, we lost both Sabrinas. Did you guys tear up like I did? Let's discuss it all in the comments below. So again, the way I want to kind of handle this video, I'm going to be talking about each of the episodes, what I liked, what I didn't like. We got to talk about, again, I said it in my spoiler-free review. I didn't talk about it in regards to in-depth and spoilers. Episode 7 is my favorite because we got both aunties. We got this Truman Show episode. I loved it. We're going to break it all down. And then we have to talk about the finale, the sacrifice of Sabrina, Nick sacrificing himself to be with Sabrina. Very emotional moment. So we're breaking it all down. So again, go ahead and start your comments now and let me know all your favorite moments of the final chapter of Sabrina. So episode 1, I'm going to just kind of rank each episode in regards to if it was okay, if it was great. So I'm going to say with episode 1, which was The Darkness, we get introduced to the miners. We get introduced to them consuming darkness. They hate the light. We see that they kill that homeless man. And we get a bunch of darkness. And we know that this was all created because there's not one, but two Sabrinas. Sabrina Spellsman and Sabrina Morningstar. And with them coming together, as Ambrose warned her so many times in part 3, was nothing but doom. Well, now the doom is here. Created by Father Blackwood and creating the void and all that stuff with the time warping and everything that we got last season. So within this first episode, like I said, I thought it was a good opener. It wasn't great, but it was just good. It was fine. It was a great way to kind of ease us into this final chapter, especially kind of get an idea of where Sabrina's at, head-wise. Nick and Prudence have a thing now. We know that Harvey and Roz have been a thing for a couple of seasons now. We know that Robin and, Theo have their thing. So Sabrina's just like, hey guys, I'm by myself. So we know what Sabrina loves to do. She loves to stir up the pot. We know that she creates this fake Bloody Mary to get the Fright Club back together, and Roz kind of realizes that. So I thought the heart of the episode really kind of gave us the through line, which I talked about in my spoiler-free review, which is loneliness and togetherness and seeing the band come together, because Sabrina, she started off the season by herself, but then she ended with Nick. So I thought it was a great way to kind of come from the beginning all the way to the end. So a really good arc. But like I said, as an episode, The Darkness, I thought it was a solid way to kick off this final part. Transitioning into episode 2, which was the garbage man, the Uninvited, which was an interesting character. Again, I mentioned in my spoiler-free review that the different entities were pretty unique. We'll talk about a couple of them a little bit later. But in regards to this gentleman who was never invited to things, he pulls your heart out. He was, of course, called upon by Father Blackwood. So I thought that was a really solid episode. We know that we have Hilda getting married to the doctor. I thought they were going to give Theo a little bit more to do this season. I thought that she was going to maybe be that werewolf, but we all know how that was resolved because the Uninvited ate the werewolf. But we saw that they were able to capture the Uninvited. Now, I want you all to let me know in the comments, did you all think that the way that they were able to wrap up the Eldritch Terror was a little bit too easy? Did you feel like it was a satisfying way to end these entities? Again, they were unkillable, but did you think they were just too convenient the way they were able to capture them into the house, how they were in the weird one? Let me know, how did you feel about the Eldritch Terror? And also let me know, out of the ones we saw, which was your favorite? Let me know that in the comments. But as far as episodes go, we see that Sabrina ends the episode with wanting to create her own perfect boyfriend with a little bit of that danger that Nick has, with the great kind of good guy that Harvey is. So let me know what you all thought about chapter 2. I thought it was an okay. Again, the first 2 episodes were just okay to me, but this is when the season got really good, and that's episode 3, which was the weird one. And I have to say, out of all the different type of entities, the Eldritch Terror, that is probably my favorite one. We get introduced to the new character. I believe his name was Lucas Hunter, which I don't watch Riverdale. I don't know if he's a Riverdale character, if he's going to cross over to Riverdale, because we know that by the end of the episode that he transferred to Riverdale. So I don't know if that's something, again, let me know in the comments, Riverdale fans. Is he in the show? Nonetheless, we see that she's hitting it off with this guy, but the biggest thing that I really enjoyed about this episode, which again speaks to Sabrina as a character, she was going to create a boyfriend, but by the end of this episode, she realized she doesn't need anyone to make her happy. And again, this is where we get the strongest aspects of Sabrina. We know she's vulnerable. We know she has a big heart. She's very open to falling in love. But I like the character arc that we get with Sabrina. And again, I love that weird one. I love the squid that was inside of her, and Ambrose sees all that. So to me, episode 3 is when the season really kind of kicked off. Again, okay, solid first 2 episodes, but episode 3 was when the show really kind of picked up to me. Going into episode 4, which was the Imp of Perverse, I'm 50-50 on this episode. Again, it was cool to kind of see the warped reality, the alternate reality with the Blackwood being the emperor. He's always been the emperor. The execution of the episode was just kind of weird. Like the fact that they didn't notice that Sabrina as well as Roz weren't wearing costumes, and the whole like them hiding, having the rebel. It was a fun episode, but it just wasn't one of my favorites. I would say it's kind of in the same vein as the first episodes, but nowhere as near as good as the fourth one, or let's say the third one. But it was really interesting to see them. I mentioned it in my non-spoiler review that they really didn't know what to do with Nick this season, so they just decided to have Nick and Prudence just break up. Again, we knew they weren't going to work out, but just the idea that Nick was like, we're the end game, Sabrina, we're going to end up together. I just thought that was just so weird the way they kind of structured the end of the episode. And again, we all knew it was coming, but I just wish it was executed a little bit more. But moving on to 2 of my least favorite episodes of this season, starting off with the Sentinel being the Megatron character. The worlds were collapsing. Hell was going to Earth. The 3 Earths were coming, or the realms were coming to Earth. That episode to me is where the show was just too much of the cosmic stuff, just didn't make that much sense as far as just narratively speaking. It was just, I love the ambitious nature. I love the weirdness of this season, but it was just like, you guys are just, there's a lot of plot holes with this whole cosmic type of situation. And again, how is this part of the Eldritch Terrors? Is it not part of the Eldritch Terrors? Does this have anything to do with the Void? It wasn't necessarily confusing. It was just too much going on for me. And this was one of the episodes, not a lot working for me. Again, we get this, and this is what I mentioned, one of my cons in my non-spoiler review. The musical aspect to me just wasn't working. The Parent Trap jokes. This episode to me was just one of the more weaker episodes, and this is where we had to learn that one of the foreshadowing of one of the Sabrinas dying. Again, they had to mention they had to merge together or they had to die, and again, that was just kind of a foreshadowing of eventually both of them eventually dying at the end of the season. But going into episode 6, which was easily my least favorite episode probably of the series. There's probably some worse episodes, and this is just probably more recent bias because I just saw the episode not too long ago. The Resurrecting the Dead was just a terribly written episode. The reveal of Marie being a guy and the way that they handled Marie and Zelda's relationship was so mishandled, and I'll speak about mishandling with Theo and Robin, but that relationship went nowhere. The sentiment of the dead coming back, and we see Edward Spellsman, we see one of the Dorcas sisters coming back. That stuff was okay, but just as a narrative to me, it just didn't play well. And the worst part of the episode for me, number one, I forgot to mention that last week, or I should say the 5th episode, is when Robin and Theo, which they didn't know what to do with Theo this season. They haven't known what to do with Theo, or say since part 1 when she was Susie, but Theo's storyline, he was just left on the cutting room floor. They gave him nothing to do, and the whole Robin breaking up and then coming back together was so poorly done. But the worst aspect of that episode was the satanic ban. Lucifer was their manager. The fact that they can just walk into the school and no one noticed that these adults that have been dead for 3 years are in the school. Again, I can get over the fact that Roz doesn't have any parents, Theo doesn't have any parents, they're just living on their own, but just anyone can walk into school was just so like whatever. But again, that satanic band was just terrible. The revenge of the girl they killed, the Harvey dad, that episode was just flat out the worst written episode in my personal opinion. And again, seeing all the dead people come back just didn't really work for me emotionally. And again, the Maria and the Zelda relationship went nowhere. Going into my favorite episode, episode 7, which was like a Truman Show episode where Sabrina Morningstar has to go to another cosmic world because of her being on the same plane, being in the same realm as Sabrina Spellsman was catastrophic. She goes into this realm and we get the aunties from the show. I didn't watch the Sabrina back in the 90s. I'm familiar with the show, but it was just so cool to see those aunties interact with my favorite aunties in this universe. It was just such a fun episode. It was so meta. They poked fun of the show with the whole, everyone's a supermodel and how characters just randomly, like Caliban having his shirt off randomly and going to the green room and how Ambrose went there and how Salem was the void and it was writing the episodes. The best written episode, the funniest episode, the most just creative episode of the entire series. I love that episode to pieces. Again, I think it was the best episode of Sabrina. Let me know you all's thoughts on the... First off, I thought it was just going to be a cameo on the aunties, but they were in the whole episode and how they became villains. I just love that episode through and through. By the end of the episode, which leads into the finale, we see Sabrina Morningstar go into the mirror. She goes back into the realm. She warns Sabrina Spellsman about the void. She dies, which obviously upsets Sabrina, which obviously sets a war off because the devil, which I mentioned in my non-spoiler review, Lucifer is just so underwhelming. He's like the most underwhelming devil Lucifer I've ever seen on any show or movie. Just like, it's like no non-menacing character. We see that he wants to wage war because Lilith, her whole end game was she wants that throne by eating her child, which I thought, I like the Lilith character. I like her more so than Mary. But Lilith, her whole backstory was just kind of underwhelming for me personally, but I love kind of her revenge story. She finally got the best of Lucifer. She took his blood, his sensual blood. That was a nice kind of end game. But just the whole idea of Lucifer coming to Earth, getting bested by his daughter. And we know that at this point, Sabrina now has the void inside of her because we know at the finale, the final chapter, the void, she gets Pandora's box, which I thought visually speaking, the way that the void looked, I don't know if you all watched the Legion show on FX, Noah Hawley. I just love the aesthetic of the void. She's able to somewhat close the void down, but we know the aunties and Ambrose and Nick pull her out, which she didn't like. But we all know that there was some void still left in her, which we know Blackwood was going to take advantage of that, takes her to the altar. We think that Sabrina's been dumbfounded, but she's been working him the whole time. They end up getting the best of Blackwood. They come up with the idea of how to get Harvey's dad back, which again, I mentioned in my other review, Harvey's one of my least favorite characters. His storylines absolutely add up to nothing, and I just don't think there's any emotional resonance with me with that character. But they decide to have Harvey, have Nicholas go into the realm, go into the void, retrieve their families. And in the mix of all this, I'm not going to lie, I did tear up because when we saw Sabrina sacrificing herself, we saw the blood draining from her body. We get those flashbacks of when she was young, how the aunties were there, how Ambrose were there. I got emotional. I'm a pretty, this show's been around for 2 years. It has its lows, but it has a lot of highs. I've come to really adore these characters, Sabrina, the aunties, Ambrose, Lilith, all the characters, even sometimes, Nicholas works for me. Prudence is really cool, but I just come to really enjoy these characters. So to see Sabrina, number one, we lost Sabrina at the beginning of the episode. We lose her at the end of the episode, which goes back to episode 1 of Loneliness. We see that she sacrificed herself. They give both Sabrinas a funeral. She's at I believe she called it the forever place that she's at with Pandora's box. And I'm sorry, she's at the suite hereafter. Nicholas dies. He goes with her and she's no longer alone. They're going to be in this suite hereafter for the rest of time. End of Sabrina. So again, in regards to my favorite episodes, episode 3 is when the season really kind of took off, when we have the weird one. Episode 7 was the best episode of the entire series with the aunties and the Truman Show and the show being written within the show and the cat being the lead writer, Salem. It was just a fantastic episode through and through. And then I thought that the finale was a really good conclusion because I was emotionally connected to seeing Sabrina sacrifice herself because we all know Sabrina just shakes things up, but she finally took responsibility. She sacrificed her own life to make sure that not only Greendale would be able to to avoid being consumed by the void, but she saved the entire world. And we know that Blackwood and Prudence is, she gets her revenge finally. We assume that Ambrose and everyone has a happy ending story. The aunties are living together again. We know that Roz is now a witch, as we found out early in the season, which out of all the mortal characters, Roz was my favorite mortal character. Again, it wasn't the acting from Harvey, it wasn't the acting from Theo, but it's just those human storylines, the mortal element, the human realm was just the most underwritten aspect compared to the supernatural realm, which again, I talked about that in my non-spoiler review. But I thought that the finale was a good way to close out the show. And just overall, I gave you all my rankings in my spoiler-free review, but for me, Part 2 is my favorite season. Part 4 is my second favorite season. Part 1 is my third. And then finishing up, Part 3 is my least favorite season. But this one was a really good way to end off a really good show. I had a fun time these last 2 years. At its best, it's supernatural, it's practical effects, it's dark, it's dementic, it has some really funny lines, some really lovable characters, and at the end of the day, I was pretty happy with the way that this show ended. So that's my spoiler review. That's discussing all my favorite episodes, breaking down more in depth what I liked, what I didn't like. Some of those subplots, Caliban taking over the throne, all that stuff just didn't really work. But at the end of the day, I think this was a really solid conclusion to a really fun show. So in the comments, let me know your favorite episodes, your pros, your cons, your thoughts on the finale. Were you satisfied? Were you disappointed? And also let me know your favorite parts of all 4 parts of Sabrina in the comments below. Thank you all for watching this spoiler review. As always, make sure to like this video, share this video, leave your thoughts in the comments section, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Make sure to hit the notification bell. That way you don't miss any of my other content. Hope you all are staying safe, and we'll see you on the next video.